In today's video, I'm here to share with you a free tutorial on the Panasonic Lumix G9 II, Panasonic's latest powerhouse of a micro four thirds camera. This is an awesome camera. I own a number of cameras from Lumix and also other brands, and this has completely surprised me. I'm shooting micro four thirds on this view over here with the Panasonic GH6, but if I had to recommend either this or a GH6, I'm recommending the G9 II. It's an absolute powerhouse, and thanks to the new autofocus and new IBIS system, there's a lot to like about this, and we'll talk more about that throughout this video. Now, this isn't a review video. If you want to see my actual review, I'll link it up in the cards or down in the description. This will be a tutorial on how to use the Panasonic Lumix G9 II. Odds are this video is going to be quite long, so what I'll do, I'll timestamp everything down in the description below so you can skip ahead back or forth if you so choose. If you're looking to just turn on the red record ring, for example, then that will be mentioned in the description. You can skip straight to that point in the video. I hope this is helpful. It's a free tutorial. If you enjoy it or if it's helpful, please leave a thumbs up, comment below, subscribe. Let's get into it. Now, if you're new to using one of these cameras, I'm going to show you how everything works just from a hardware standpoint. So here's the camera up close over here. Now, if we take a look at the back of the camera, we can open the fully articulating touchscreen just by pulling open on this door. Now, this is a fully articulating touchscreen, which means we can fully articulate it towards us. So if you want to do any type of vlogging, you can have it facing you, which is fantastic. Now, the camera that I'm shooting with right now, I can see myself on the screen. It's an S5 Mark II, and I've also got a reference monitor over here. But if you don't have a reference monitor, having a fully articulating screen is so easy. Now, the great thing about this screen is you can also just flip it back onto itself and use it in this position, so it opens up a lot of options. While we do get this fully articulating touchscreen, and I'm a big fan of it, we also get an electronic viewfinder. These are also referred to as EVF. So if you hear someone say EVF, they're actually saying electronic viewfinder in an abbreviated form. So this allows you to put your eye up to the eyepiece here and see exactly what's going on. It's exactly the same as using this, except there's no glare. So this is a big benefit of this. If you're out shooting on a bright sunny day, you don't want to have to flip the screen open all the time. You can just hold it up to your eye like this. I sometimes use that even for shooting video. A lot of photographers will use it, but it does come in handy. It also comes in handy for playback, especially in situations where you might have a hard time seeing the screen. But with saying that, the screen on this is quite good, but the EVF is there if you want to use it. If you're someone who wears glasses or contacts, and if you're using the EVF thinking, man, this doesn't look quite right, you can actually adjust the EVF and how it looks to your eye. So there's a little dial over here called a diopter. All you need to do is turn this left or right and just see if you get better results one way or the other. But if you've got regular eyesight or close enough like I do, it's just close enough to normal, then you shouldn't have to adjust it straight out of the box. It looked fine to my eye. The benefit of the fully articulating touchscreen is you can use it as a touchscreen to navigate the menus or set your focus point. You can also use the joystick on the back of the camera over here to navigate the menus, or this wheel. Now, this wheel not only spins, but you can also click it up, down, left, and right, and it allows you to map features to those up, down, left, and right clicks. It's pretty cool, and we'll talk more about that later. Nestled into this really great grip on the camera is our SD card door. So to open the door, all you need to do is push on this section over here towards you, and it will pop open automatically. Now, when it comes to your SD cards, the label faces you. So the camera's facing forward, the label is facing me, or the terminals are facing, the other way. So all you need to do is pop this in. I'll show you a shot from behind here. Push it in, it will click in. Now, if you want to take it out, all you have to do is push it again and it will pop out. So this is the great thing about it. It's kind of spring-loaded mechanism style thing. So it will just push down, it will lock, push it again, it will pop back up. Now, to close the door, it's exactly the same process as before. All we need to do is push it this way, close it until it clicks, and you're in business. When it comes to choosing the right SD card, I'll leave my recommendation in the description below. There'll be affiliate links that'll help support this video and my channel. Now, this particular card is a V90 128GB card, and that means that it's nice and fast. Some of the older cards, the old SanDisk ones from back in the day, were V30s, so they're much slower than this. These cards will not only handle the burst rate photography side better, but it will also allow you to record in all of the modes that are compatible with an SD card of this speed. Any slower and you'll limit yourself on what you can actually record with the camera. So make sure you get a set of these V90 SD cards. Again, I'll link them down in the description. Up next, I'm going to show you how to put a battery into the camera and also all of the different powering modes. So the battery door is located under the main grip over here. All you need to do is push down, use your thumbnail or whatever, push down here, the battery door will flip open. Much like the SD card door, everything's kind of spring-loaded. It's great. So that will stay open unless we close it by doing exactly the same thing. Just by pushing up on the latch, it will lock it back into place. And we get a DMW BLK22 battery, which was first found in the Panasonic S5, the original one, which I'm shooting with over here. It's a great battery and it will give you really great runtime with this camera. Let's do it. So the battery faces sort of like the short way of the battery. Goes in like this. Boom. That's it. It clicks into place. If you want to remove the battery, there's a little latch here, this little white latch. All you need to do is pull this up. Battery will spring out, push it back in, close the door, lock it, and we're done. It's that simple. When it comes to charging the battery, unfortunately, this camera doesn't come with a dedicated battery charger. I'm not sure why Panasonic stopped doing this. It's probably to make the camera less expensive, but for an extra $20, whatever the case may be, I would rather have one included in the box. I know I speak for a few people with that. But essentially you do get a charger. It's just a wall charger. And from that, you can then charge the battery internally using the USB-C cable. While this isn't the actual USB-C cable in the box, it's the same type. So the long rectangle side is the one that goes into the wall charger. And then the USB-C type, this little sort of circular one, is the one that goes into the camera. On the opposite side of the camera to the battery grip is this little door. You can put your fingernail under there and pull open this. This is where we have our full-size HDMI port and our USB-C port over here. So to charge the battery, all you need to do is have this go right in there once it's plugged in, have the camera off, and you'll start charging your battery. The great thing about the G9 Mark II is much like the S5 Mark II, we can run this on USB-C PD or power delivery. That's what it stands for, USB power delivery. Now this allows you to run the camera indefinitely. Just leave the battery in, hook up to the USB-C port using that power delivery, and you can let the camera run all day and it won't run out of charge. Again though, it has to be a 9-volt 3-amp power supply, and I'll link to what I use in the description below. Now if you plan on using a dummy battery, the great news is the S5 or S5 Mark II dummy battery will work with the G9 Mark II. You can simply just pop out the battery here. We get the same rubberized weather sealed door over here as well that allows you to put the AC cable through, or the battery cable through, and then into your wall socket, and that will power the camera indefinitely. Just know though, unlike USB-C, where we're leaving this battery in, the power cuts, you lose the file. And this is one of the biggest benefits of USB-C PD. I'm kind of migrating over to it on the most part, but I just don't have enough of them yet. Again, I'll leave my recommendation down in the description. Over to attaching a lens. So this is nice and simple. Let's take a look at this. So we get this little body cap here. You can simply turn it towards the handle here and it will come straight off. To put it back on, it's the opposite motion. Now I've got this 25mm f1.7 prime here. Same thing again, we need to take the lens cap off. And then I'm going to align the red dots. So on the camera body here, we have a red dot. And then on the lens, we also have a red dot. So they need to be sort of like touching. And then we just simply twist the lens here until it clicks. Now this isn't going to come off now unless we want to release it using this button on the side over here. So this button, we can push this down, we can turn it this way towards the grip and it will come off. And to reattach it, align the red dots and turn it the opposite way until it clicks. Let's talk about turning the camera on and off and the benefit of this particular on-off switch. So the on-off switch is just to the left of the red record button over here. It's right here, it just clicks up and you're ready to go. Now the cool thing with this camera, the boot times are very fast. So if I turn it back off for a moment, turn it back on, look how quick it loads. That message you're seeing is just telling me that there's no SD card in here, but it loads up nice and fast. So in a pinch, you could just have the flippy screen closed, have it off, turn it on, and start shooting photos in about a second. It's pretty cool. There's a couple of different control wheels on this camera that you'll definitely become familiar with. This front one over here, which in video mode controls the aperture, allowing us to set how blurry the background will be. And this back wheel over here, which controls the shutter speed, which is how good the motion blur looks, or how fast or choppy you want it to look. It's up to you. We'll talk more about that later. So these two, you can operate one with your thumb and one with your finger. They're in intuitive spots. It's great. When it comes to taking a photograph, our shutter button is just over here. So it's in our index position right near this front wheel. You can half press it to confirm focus, and then you can just push it down from that point and it will take the shot. It's pretty cool. And if you're in a burst mode, you can just simply hold it down and it will do its thing. It's great. If you want to record, for example, you can hit this record button over here for video, or you can actually start recording if you're in video mode already just by pushing down on the shutter. So it gives you a few different ways to operate kind of the same thing. It's quite cool. This wheel over here is called the command dial, and what this allows us to do is to switch modes on the camera. So to get into the mode that you want, there's a little white line on the camera body over here. So as long as whatever you want is in line with that, that's the mode you'll be on. Now just know you can sort of use some of the modes that might seem similar to each other, but they are different. I'm not going to go through all of the different modes and explain them all, but the main video mode has the video camera icon. We get S and Q, which stands for slow and quick. This allows us to choose a separate mode from our movie mode that might be 1 shot per second all the way up to something like 300 frames per second in HD. Now this also shoots 4K 120 frames per second, which is awesome. So if you just want a quick mode to get into for shooting slow motion, S and Q is where you dial that in. Now if we take a look at C1, 2, and 3, we get 3 programmable options by using this dial. I think the camera allows you to store way more than that on the inside through the software, but it means if I'm shooting in this studio, I've got everything mapped to C1. If I go into my guitar studio, I'll have everything mapped to C2, and then I won't have to keep going back through the settings and changing the white balance and all that kind of stuff. So basically these 3 settings allow you to customize the camera and store a particular setting. It's awesome. On the dial, we also get IA mode, which is intelligent auto photo mode. So all you need to do is turn the camera on, click the shutter, and take a photo. It's that simple. The camera handles everything. Now we also get a few other options on here as well. One is called program mode. Now program mode is another automatic mode. It basically looks after everything for you. We also get A, which is aperture priority mode. This is what I would use if I'm shooting photos on the most part, just to assign how much depth of field I want. We also get shutter priority mode as well, which comes in handy if you want to shoot something, either a really fast sports object or something going very quickly, or maybe you want to blur out some of the motion in a waterfall. Shutter priority mode is what I would use. Now, there's a full manual mode on here as well, which is denoted by M. That might be too advanced if you're just getting into photography, but I think aperture priority mode is a safe way to start, and that's what I would suggest using if you're looking to get some of that blurry background. This dial over here gives us all of our different photographic modes, and while this is a great video camera, it's also a great photography camera. So if you bought this for photography, you've got yourself an absolute beast. I think it's industry leading for micro four thirds. So we get a single photo mode, 2 burst photo modes, and a handheld high resolution mode. This handheld high resolution mode is insane. It allows the camera to take a 100 megapixel image by taking a series of photos all done in camera, shifting the sensors slightly and then compiling it, and it drives the noise floor down, and you just get these really big, beautiful photos. So if you're into doing landscapes, that's the mode to be using. We also get a timer mode as well. So if you want to just take a photo of a family and have everybody jump into the shot, you get that as well. And also a time-lapse feature. Let's take a look at the back of the camera, starting with the play button over here. So for example, if you've just taken a whole bunch of photos or videos and you want to look at them again, all you need to do is open up the screen here or use the EVF and hit play, and you'll be able to cycle through them using these 2 controls over here. Now there's a few extended sort of controls on how to do this as well. If you want to grid preview everything, you can use this wheel at the front once you're in playback mode and turn it to the left if you're behind the camera. And what this will do is grid it in much smaller icons, so you can then touch the one that you want and zoom in and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty intuitive, just play around with it, but basically the play button works in that fashion. Then we have the LVF button over here. The LVF button works in conjunction with the sensor that's on the back of the EVF. So sometimes you might be taking a photo and the screen shuts off and you're like, why is the screen shutting off? It's designed so even with this open, if you hold it up to your eye, the screen will go off to conserve battery life. But if you cycle through the LVF modes, you can have one on, one off all of the time, or both on all of the time. So if you're wondering, hey, why is my screen off? I can't work out why my screen's not working. It has to do with the LVF setting on the back. So just keep that in mind. Now on the back of the camera here, we get a 3-way joystick which controls the focus mode. So we've got manual focus, continuous autofocus, and single shot autofocus. This works for both video and photo, although video is more so continuous autofocus or manual focus. Single shot is great if I'm doing a product shot where nothing is moving, the camera's in a stationary position. I don't want the focus going crazy or doing anything it shouldn't. I just want to assign a point. Single shot is the way to go. Now, when it comes to continuous autofocus, this is great for moving subjects for both video and photography. When it comes to shooting in manual focus mode, you'll be pulling focus either by using the focus ring on the lens, or there's an AF on button on the back over here as well, which allows you to basically lock focus wherever the focus point is, and I'll show you that in just a moment. One of my favorite things about Panasonic cameras is the Q menu, and you can bring this up just by simply hitting the Q button on the back of the camera, and it brings up all of our settings at a glance. So if you want to change something like the shooting mode from manual to aperture priority, we can either use the touch screen or we can use these wheels on the back. So I can cycle through them this way as well. You can see them change between P, M, S, A, and back to P. So let's just change that to aperture priority. Say I want to change the shutter, the recording mode from 100 frames per second down to something else. Let's change it to 50p instead. We can do that. Now we can also control all of these options by using this little guy over here, right? So I've got this wheel working towards our favor now. We can cycle through everything using the wheel, or we can use the joystick to go between all of the different settings as well. So it really offers many different ways to do exactly the same thing, but the Q menu is great irrespective of the mode you're in, but especially for video mode, I can't live without it. It's a great feature. Another thing I love about the G9 Mark II is the display button over here. So say for example, the Q menu, we don't really need that. We want more of a visual guide rather than just an overview setting guide. We can hit this a couple of times and it will bring up this menu. And this is so helpful. This is one of my favorite things about these cameras. So it gives us everything at a glance and we can tap on any of these to change any of the settings. How great is this? So we can just simply change the ISO like that. We can go set or on screen, or we can hit the button in the middle, which is the menu set button. We can change the white balance like this. It basically brings everything into a visual guide. So yeah, the display button is really handy. By default, these two buttons on the inside next to the grip aren't really mapped to anything, so you can map them to whatever you want. I'll show you that coming up. If you plan on using this camera with a tripod or gimbal, right underneath the camera here is our screw point. You can put the base plate on, take it off, and you'll be in business. Now we all know that great audio quality trumps great video quality. So when it comes down to it, this camera is fully loaded. It gives us lots of different options. We get a 3.5mm audio input over here, which is great for wireless packs or shotgun microphones. And we also get a headphone out socket. The headphone out socket can be used not only in real time when shooting a video for someone else if you want to ensure that the audio is good, but you can also use it to play back your files and have a listen. So if you're shooting on your own, you can make sure that your audio is fine before you head home, get into your editing suite and go, oh no, I didn't plug in my audio pack properly, or it was off, or whatever the case may be. So this does have a built-in speaker, but just having a headphone socket is really, really helpful, especially in certain scenarios. One of the upgrades I love about the G9 Mark II is that it's fully compatible with the DMW-XLR adapter that I've had for so long. Simply remove the little plastic tab from the hot shoe here. This clicks into place, you can lock it in, and now you have the ability to record really high quality audio using this little XLR adapter. There's two microphone sockets on this side. Now this offers so much more flexibility than just using the onboard 3.5mm audio connector, but that actually still offers you a lot of flexibility. The great news is with this camera, we get 4 channels of audio, so you can mix between either the two shotgun mics, 3.5mm, or of course the onboard microphones, which you can fully customize as well. So there's a lot to like about this. I think if you're going to be doing a YouTube channel, for example, having an XLR adapter is awesome. I'm not fully set up in here. This is the only second video I've done in this room, but now that I moved in here, I'll definitely be using this moving forward. Let's take a look at the main menu and all of the stuff that you'll want to change if you've just bought this camera. So to get into the main menu, hit the menu set button on the back. Notice the recording file format is set to MP4. To get into this and change it, we hit the menu set button again. And then we can change it from MP4 to either MOV or Apple ProRes. Now, if you're just getting into this, MOV is more than enough. Apple ProRes is going to take up so much more data on your SD cards for the modes that it can actually record internally, or you'll have to go out over an SSD. So choose MOV, you'll get way more options. Just hit the menu set button to select it. Now when we scroll down to recording quality, what we're going to see are all 10-bit codecs. These are both 420 and 422. Anytime you see 422 like this one, it means we're getting the most amount of color information. Anytime you see 420 10-bit, it means it's still a 10-bit file, but we're not getting quite as much color information. But these are both great. I actually shoot a lot in 420 10-bit rather than 422. It's a lot easier to edit, and it's more than enough color information. I'm shooting on the S5 Mark II in that exact mode right now. So this is how I like to work. And then as we go up, it gets into the 4K modes. Now I'm in the PAL region, which is why you're seeing this as 25p here. If you're in North America, you'll see it as 30 and 60p. Here's another 4K 50p. This also supports DCI 4K, which is Cinema 4K. That's the other way you can say that. I'm just going to keep scrolling up. We start to get into the 4.4K modes, which are what you might want to use if you're shooting anamorphic, for example. Then we get into the 5.7K with a 17:9 aspect ratio, which is actually slightly thinner than this, but a much bigger file overall. 4K to 5.7K doesn't sound like a lot, but the pixel density is quite a lot different. And then we can shoot all the way up at 5.8K, 25 frames per second, 420 10-bit. So this is giving us the full sensor readout, which is more almost like a square file as opposed to, it's not quite square, it's a rectangle, but it's almost like a square compared to standard widescreen. But we can chop a full 4K image out of this either vertically or horizontally and get a really high density image that looks every bit as good as this, but we can reframe it however we like. So a lot of people will shoot in OpenGate if they want to crop a short out of it without losing information, or working with a smaller vertical video like you'd find if I was to crop, say, a 16:9 image. Yeah, OpenGate's there if you so choose to use it. It's a great option, but yeah, for most people, just stick to 4K. I think 4K is probably going to be enough. And these 5.7K options are also very good. But 4K is pretty much still the standard for online work. And unless you're doing sort of like high-end production stuff, I think that'll do the job. Say, for example, I wanted to record at 4K at 50 frames per second. Once I'm done selecting it, I hit the menu set button on the back of the camera, and we're good to go. And then we can shoot in that particular mode. Now, if we go up to image area of video, as you can see, it says full. So we can go also into pixel to pixel mode, which basically crops in digitally and uses a smaller portion of the sensor. This can be handy if you only have one lens and you need to zoom in a little bit and you can't actually move the camera, but I would leave this to full. It's going to give you the best image quality. From the record quality option menu, we want to go back up to the top here. So I'm going to go all the way up to exposure mode type. Now you can change this by using the Q menu that I showed you before on the back of the camera, or you can do it in here as well. So if I wanted to change from shutter priority, for example, over to aperture or manual mode, I could do it this way. It's nice and simple. We can change the photo styles here as well. And if you've got the lens cap off, you'll actually see a real-time sort of indication of what these look like as well. So I just wanted to change this back to natural. I could do that. Notice I've turned the contrast down a bit. If you want to turn that back up, you can simply use the wheels on the back of the camera to make these adjustments. But I kind of like this one with -2 on the contrast, and the rest looks pretty great. Let's take a look at the metering modes. One of the things I love about this camera is if you're not sure what anything is, you can hit the display button on the back when you select it, and it will tell you what's going on. So this says measures brightness of the whole screen automatically. So it tries to get an average and expose accordingly. This is where it's set by default, and it usually works pretty well. Where it won't work well is in a situation like this, where there's a heavy light behind me and I'm in the center of frame. So for this, I would choose a different mode. This is optimized exposure of the subject for the center of frame. This can work, but I don't use it very often. I usually use this one right here, which is within the spot metering target. And I'll show you how this actually looks right now. I'll turn the display off and we'll fire this up. Now the way that this works is pretty simple. Anywhere the plus sign is where the camera will expose. So if I bring this over to the camera at the back, it's going to bring up the exposure because it wants to get the camera tripod exposed properly. If I bring it over to the plastic tubs, it's going to expose differently. If I bring it over the really bright section at the back, it's going to expose for that, which brings everything down. Now this mode's not ideal in every situation, but I expose skin tones this way. My S5 Mark II, for example, is set up with a plus right here, and I'm set to -1/3 EV, which is proper skin exposure, at least when shooting in the natural picture profile. If you're shooting outdoors in particular, I would just leave this set to the top one. It's the easiest mode to get you started, and that's what I use anytime I'm filming outdoors. We also get the ability to change the ISO sensitivity on the low point and the high point. So with the G9 Mark II, what I've found is its best ISO range is from 100, which is the low point that it's got it already set to, and 3200. So you can just leave it set like that. But in a pinch, you could push it to 6400 or 12,800 if you're really desperate, but I wouldn't use that at all for any of my filmmaking. So I would set it to 3200. I don't want it going higher than that. I love the fact that this is included. As we go down over here, we get SS gain operation. Now by default, it's set to the top option, SEC ISO. But what you want to set it to is angle ISO. This will give us the shutter speed option that you see on the bottom left-hand side. It says actually 357 right now. So what I'm going to do is go into manual mode on the camera, and I'll show you the benefit of this. So we get into manual mode, we go back. Now it says 180 degrees, which is perfect. I can swap now between 4K 25, 50, or 100 or 200 frames per second, and the shutter speed will match accordingly. It'll be set correctly by the camera, automatically having it at 180 degrees. Now, if we go down a page to image quality number 2 here, we have this iDynamic range option. If we go into this, I'm just going to show you how differently it captures the scene. So right now we're set to off. If I go into low and hit the menu set button, it's going to expose the whole scene differently. This kind of gives you the perception of more dynamic range. It's a really cool feature. If we go into standard, that's how it looks. It looks brighter again, and the blacks are less crushed. As we go into high, we get more of the same. So it's kind of like boosting the overall scene. This can come in really handy, and it's a feature that I don't hear too many people talking about, but definitely give it a go if you're not getting the image quality that you want in a particular room. Up next, we're going to take a look at the focus options. So there's so many different options within this particular menu, but the great news is the camera just autofocuses really well from the get-go. But as you can see, we've got detecting subject. It's set to human. We can change this to animal, car, or motorcycle. Now there's a whole lot of sub modes in the first two as well. So human has a few different modes. As you can see, we've got the little face there. It goes eye, face, and body, and it works in a list. So if it can't find an eye, it will find a face. If it can't find a face, it will do body detection, depending on how far or close you are to the camera, which is great. Or you can just set it to eye and face. It's up to you which one works best for you. But for me, eye, face, and body definitely works the best. Now, if you're holding things up a lot to the camera, sometimes it can latch onto your hands because it is body detection. If I just glance my face, it may actually go over to my hands. Some Sony cameras, for example, will stay locked on the eye until you completely cover it. I sort of prefer the autofocus on this. I think just glancing over your face usually means that you're going to hold something up that you want focused on, but you can set it to whatever you like, right? This is the beauty of the system. Now, if we go into animal detection, for example, we also get two options here. We've got the body and we've got eye body, and both of these work great, but eye body is exceptional, especially if you're up close to an animal. I've tested this extensively, and body detection works, and it will track an animal all the way back in the frame. I've tested this with a couple of different types of birds and ducks and so forth, and also with a horse, and it worked beautifully. So yeah, if you're going to be tracking animals, use this mode. Now, the cool thing about this mode too is if a person's in the frame instead of an animal, it's smart enough to know that it's going to start prioritizing that person's face instead of the animal. So it's great. You don't have to just worry about changing modes all the time. One of the first things you need to change as soon as you buy this camera, otherwise you'll think the autofocus is broken, is this. By default, it's set to mode 1, which says continuous autofocus only works while recording video. You want it on this one. It means continuous autofocus works all of the time, even when you're not recording. So leave this on mode 2. It will make you feel a whole lot better knowing that your focus is good to go. Focus peaking is one of my favorite features. If we go into manual focus again, for example, I'm going to show you how this works. So we can go down to set. I've got it set to +2, and it's currently white right now as well, which was good for when I was shooting outside recently. So if I pull focus like this, you'll see that the focus peaking shows up on the lens there on the GH6, which I'm not actually recording with right now. And you can set the intensity, color, and all of that stuff from the same menu. So if we go back in, go to focus peaking, you can change this to a different color, maybe something that might look, you know, a little bit better. We can maybe use red. Red's a good color. Let's try that, and boom. So interestingly enough, when you're in this mode and you're recording, you see the focus peaking a little bit more than when it's just at standby like this. But yeah, it's a really great feature. I'm just using manual focus. You can set it to AFS, which is what you saw down here. This is autofocus single. So say, for example, I just wanted to confirm focus by using the shutter. boom, the focus peaking comes up just by half pressing. It's pretty cool. Let's take a look at the audio option. So one thing you want to make sure that's on, so you can see it on the back of your selfie screen, I can still see it on my cameras that I'm recording with, is the sound record level. You've just got to have this on. So if it's off, turn it on. Go down to record level here, and you can change it from standard to low. There's other ways you can do this as well, but I'm just going through the main menu right now. I'm going to show you this other way. So if you touch the display button on the back of the camera a couple of times, it brings up the menu that I showed you before. Now from this particular menu, you can simply tap on the levels that are moving to change them, and it will bring you into this menu. This is one of the great things about the camera. Now you can't see it on the back of this screen because I'm recording it out into my recorder right now, but when you don't have a HDMI plugged in, you can do it this way. It's just a quick way of getting around it. So you've got two levels here, standard and low. If you're clipping in standard, you can drop it down to low. But the cool thing is we get up to minus 18 dB of gain, so you can drop it all the way down. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how this works, 0 dB is usually the threshold where you don't want to go over unless you really have to, otherwise it's going to start clipping. I try to get my audio not clipping whatsoever, which means distorting. So if you look at that on screen, it's very close to clipping. Just doesn't fill me with confidence. It's getting too close to the 0 dB on the top, so I'm just going to back this down. Now, if I was recording, I would probably keep it somewhere around there, so it's maybe just getting into the first orange, maybe even a little bit lower. Somewhere around there is good, so just stick to the yellow option to be safe, and you can always adjust it in post-production. Now, I always leave the sound record limiter on, but if you don't want it on, you can turn it off, and this wind noise canceller, just leave it set to standard. On the next page down in the audio options here, we have this mic socket, which denotes the 3.5mm audio input on the side. We can change this from mic to plug-in power. So if you've got a shotgun microphone that requires phantom power through that TRS connector, it will actually power it from the camera, which is great. We also have a standard mic input and a line input. So you can record via a line signal, which actually drops the overall input. So if you're going out of a mixer that has a line output, for example, you can plug it directly into the camera. To change your headphone volume, you can simply go into this option here and then turn it down or up. It's up to you. Now you can also do this from the playback option on the screen. So there's other ways around doing just about everything, but if you want to use the main menu, that's where it's at. If you do plan on using headphones with this, you can monitor different channels in the headphones itself. So it gives you plenty of different options. By default, it's channel 1 and channel 2, which is what I would just leave it on. But if you go into this menu, there's all of these different options here, especially if you're using the DMW-XLR adapter. From the last option on this particular menu option, which is the video camera with the 3 dots, if we go over to image stabilizer, you can see we get a list of different options. Now the operation mode is on by default, which is great. If you want to turn it off for whatever reason, you can do that, but leave it on. Then we get this option called E-Stabilization. So this works in 2 different steps, well 3 if you count off. So standard means we're going to get a little bit of a crop on our image, but we get excellent stabilization. If you're using a 12mm lens like the 12 to 35, 12 to 60, 14 to 42, or whatever the case may be, the standard mode will be all you need, right? Because this lens in particular also has optical image stabilization. The results out of standard paired with that lens are insanely great. And then we can also go into the high mode. So I've tested this with a 6mm lens, a 10mm, and a 12, and the results are almost as good as a GoPro. It's absolutely insane. This is best suited to really wide angle lenses because you do lose quite a bit of the frame, but the results are just really impressive. This has the best stabilizer I've ever seen in any camera. The next option is Boost IS. This is Boost Image Stabilization. Now, this is a fantastic feature that helps you mimic a tripod. I'm going to show you this right now. So how about this, right? I'm going to just look at the GH6 back here. We'll take the lens cap off. It's always a little bit better that way. And we're on manual focus here. There we go. All right, so I've got the GH6, and as you can see, I've got the 2 little shaky hands in the top left, which means the Boost IS is not on. So let's turn it on. Boost IS, boom. Watch this. How crazy is that? It looks like it's on a tripod, and I'm just sitting here holding it. Now I am turning and talking, so if I was just to hold it steady, we're getting excellent results even with this 25mm lens. It's really quite great. Now I'm going to show you what it looks like with the other mode on as well. So if we go into E-Stabilization, turn this to standard, it looks unbelievable. Like this is just, it's hilarious. I can see myself shaking a little bit from the caffeine, and it's very, very stable. If we go into the next mode as well, I'll bring this up to high. Boom, look at this. So it does crop in quite a lot more, but the stabilization results are fantastic. Now, there's a few different ways that I like to work with this camera. So getting into the menu like this isn't always ideal. I'm going to show you how to map a button to the camera and what I've mapped. So diving through the menu, especially for a stabilizer option, isn't always ideal. And what I've done, I've actually mapped the E-Stabilization to this back button here. So if I hit this button on screen, you're going to see a quick menu come up, and I can simply turn it off to standard or high at the push of a button. Now, say for example, I wasn't interested in using the E-Stabilization and I wanted to map something, say like the IS boost, which is still on right now. I can just simply hold down the button on the back of the camera and we can choose what we want to map to that option. Now, there's all of these 3 or 4 pages of options here. I'm just going to choose Boost IS for the sake of the experiment. If we take a look at the top right-hand side, if I hit this button again, we go back to normal dual IS mode or standard image stabilization mode. And then if I hit the button again, it goes back into boost mode. Actually, I don't think it's dual IS with this particular lens. It'll just be the standard mode. Speaking of which, if we switch lenses, some lenses like this 12 to 35mm f2.8 has dual IS, which is what I said before. So as you can see now, when I get out of boost mode, it says dual 2, which is the most amount of stabilization. This will give us even more stabilization than you just saw with this little prime lens. So it's crazy just how many stops we get. I think it's rated around 7.5 or something for shooting video, which is crazy. Let's take a look at the autofocus modes for shooting video. Just make sure that you're not in any manual focus mode or that the lens isn't in a manual focus mode if it has it. So we're going to set the back joystick here to C. Now, if we tap on the autofocus button, which is in the middle here, you can see it brings up this mode. Now, this gives us all of our different area modes. So we've got tracking, which you probably don't really need anymore. We've got the full area AF, which is what I like to shoot in a lot of the time. It's what I'm shooting with my S5 Mark II right now. This mode is zone, so you can select an area within the frame. You also have one area plus, which is a really powerful mode. I use this a lot still. It allows you to set up a box with like a little box around it. And if you glance the box anywhere, it will then decide on the tracking type that you've selected. It sounds kind of complicated, but it will make a lot of sense in a moment. One area mode is just a square, right? So from this mode, if we hit up, it's going to add the animal tracking that we added before, right? If we hit it up again, it's going to turn it off, and up is just with this back button. Say for example, we don't want animal tracking and we want to switch it over to human tracking. We hit display, as it says on screen, detect subject. So we hit the display button. We can change this to human, and then we've got human, animal, face, body, or any of the options that we choose. So there's a really quick way of just getting into those options. Again, if we want to choose to turn off human tracking, we can hit up again and it will turn off. It's pretty cool. I'm just going to quickly show you some of the autofocus modes here. So if we tap the autofocus button on the back of the camera here, this is full area AF. I'm going to hit up and turn on the human, face, and body tracking and just show you a quick example of what this looks like. So let's just get out of this. Oh, I'll just hit the shutter button and boom, I've got a box around my face. If I move it back far enough or further away from me, you'd see a yellow box show up on my body. And if I change this to eye, you can see it still tracks my eye with that little plus, but you can set it to dedicated eye tracking mode as well if you so choose. But this works great. This is my preferred mode anytime I'm talking to the camera. Now, say for example, there's more than one person in the frame. The second person will have a white box on them. If you want the focus to go to them, you simply tap on their face on the back of the selfie screen, and then it will lock focus on them. It's really smart how it works. I'm also going to show you this one area plus, which is one of my favorite modes, especially on the older Panasonic cameras, but I love this mode. This allows you to use a box like this, and as long as I'm anywhere within the box, it's going to track me perfectly. Now, you can see that there's a yellow box over my face. If I get out of the yellow box, it's not going to be there, but as soon as I get back in that yellow box, I'm tracked again. This is a really good zone mode, and it's one of my favorites. I'm going to put together a full dedicated video just talking about the autofocus features on this camera, because otherwise the video is going to be too long. So don't forget to subscribe, leave a thumbs up if you're enjoying the video so far. Let's keep going. From the cogwheel, we're going to burn through a few of these options over here. So if we take a look at the LUT library option, this camera is capable of storing 10 of your very own LUTs, which means if you're shooting in Vlog, you can burn a LUT in at the time of filming. This is great if you want to save time in post-production. The process to do this is a little convoluted, but Panasonic made a great video about it, and I'll link it down in the description. ISO increments, I always leave this set to 1/3 EV. It just gives you a little bit more precision when setting exposure. Extended ISO, you can turn this on if you want. I just leave it off. It allows you to get, you can crank up the ISO even more, but just leave it set to off. You won't need it. Now, if you plan on shooting in manual focus, one thing I always turn off, which might be a little counterintuitive, is this particular feature. So I don't like the picture-in-picture box that comes up anytime I'm shooting in manual focus. It drives me crazy. So from this menu, we're going to turn the focus ring off. And we're also going to turn picture-in-picture to full. So now when I'm shooting in manual focus, what's going to happen is if I turn the focus ring, it's not going to zoom in. I much prefer this. It's just so much easier to work with, especially if you're trying to see exactly what's going on all around the focus point as well. So it's up to you how you prefer to work, but I always turn those features off. I've just turned these features back on just so you can see on screen here. This won't record out, but essentially you get this big magnification box here, which I don't think you need, especially with the tools that are given to us through focus peaking. From the cogwheel, we're going over to the camera and then onto page 2 of monitor display photo. Now this level gauge I always turn on. This allows you to see your horizontal point when either using the camera handheld or on a tripod. I can see that both of my cameras are straight just by looking at them. I can see this green line. If I'm slightly off, I'll know by a yellow indication. So the green line, this level gauge, leave it on 100% of the time. Within the same menu, just on the next page down, we have the Vlog View Assist. This can come in really handy. When it says monitor here, where it says Vlog View Assist monitor, this is just for the back of the selfie screen here or the EVF, which allows you to see exactly what's going on when you're shooting in Vlog with a bit more of an accurate color representation. Now, if you're going out over HDMI and you want to see it with Vlog on, you can turn this on as well. I'm not really sure why you would want to leave this off unless you're going out into, say, an Atomos Ninja and that's doing all of the work. But for most people who are just, shooting in Vlog, turn both of these two on. Now, if you plan on shooting anamorphic a lot of the time, we get the Anamorphic De-Squeeze display, which actually corrects the display on the preview. So when you're recording, you don't see a sort of bunched up, squished image. It actually looks like the aspect ratio that you're shooting in. Now we get all of these different options, 1.3, 1.33, 1.5, 1.8, and 2. For those who predominantly shoot in anamorphic, you can map that feature to one of the custom function buttons just by holding it down for 2 seconds and then finding it in the menu. Another couple of my favorite tools here are center marker. If you turn this on, you get like a Counter-Strike crosshair. It's a game for those who don't know what that is. And it's basically like just letting you know exactly where center is, so you can turn that on if you want. One of the features I love using, and I'm using it on my S5 Mark II right now, is the safety zone marker. I always turn this to on, and I use this one right here, which brings up little borders on the outside of frame. This just lets you know exactly where the safe areas are. Some displays are different to others, and if you're shooting within that area, then you'll get the framing that you're looking for. But it's just a really cool thing to have on. It also helps you sort of frame up your shot when it comes to having lots of straight lines. Now, being that I've been shooting Lumix since the GH5, one of my favorite tools for monitoring a scene, especially with exposure, is the Waveform. I love this tool. Now, this won't get sent over HDMI here, so I'll just show you the back of the screen. So the cool thing with this is it's down here, right? It's this little box. Now, if you're thinking, how do you read that? It's so small. The great news is you can tap on it, move it wherever you like, and make it larger thanks to the back wheel. So this helps you set exposure properly. Now, if you haven't seen it already, go check out DP Review's video on how to read a waveform. It's invaluable, and it helped me understand not only how to set the exposure properly on the camera, but it also helped me in editing as well. So give it a watch. I'll link it below. Up next, we're taking a look at the red record frame indicator. Panasonic, you need to have this on by default. Don't make us menu die for this. I would love to see this on by default on future camera releases. This just gives us a big red bar around the screen, like all the way around it, this big record frame indicator, which is what it is, letting us know we're recording. Otherwise, all you see is this little light blinking and a counter. It's just a really great visual representation to know you're recording. I can see it on both of my cameras right now. It's awesome. On the next screen down, we have our in-out option. This is HDMI record output. So say you need a clean feed to send into a capture card or A10 mini and you're doing some sort of switching and you don't want all the info on screen, you can simply go into this option and then turn it off. But being that I need it on for what I'm doing right now, I'm going to leave it on. But if you need a clean HDMI feed, you've got it at your disposal. From this Lens Others menu here, you get a really powerful feature, especially if you're in a situation where your cameras are never moving and you want to set up manual focus. You've got this option called Lens Focus Resume. So if I turn off my cameras, turn them back on, they're always going to maintain focus at the same point that they were left. I love this. I've got another studio set up for my guitar channel where all of my cameras are on this particular mode, except for my main Panasonic S5 Mark II, which is running autofocus. But the rest of them are just manually focused. I can turn them off, come back in the next day, put my chair in the same spot, and everything's in focus. It's a really great tool. For those who like to shoot in manual focus, I can highly recommend changing the focus ring control from non-linear to linear. This will help you do repeatable and reliable focus pulls. Now you can set the threshold about how far you have to turn the focus ring on the lens to pull focus reliably and repeatably. Now you get all these different options down here, maximum all the way back down to 90 degrees, which is the lowest. I actually like 150, but experiment around it and find the one that works best for you. This means I only have to turn the lens 150 degrees before it goes between minimum and infinity focus. To format your SD card, all you need to do is go into the wrench menu, go up to the card file option and click on card format. That's it, and it will format your card. Then if you've got more than one card in there, you can select which one you want. This doesn't have any cards in there right now, so I'm not going to show you that, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Now, double card slot function is fantastic. This allows you to change the recording method. So if I go into this, we've got relay recording set up. So once one SD card fills up, and then we'll go on to the next. If I'm doing something really important like a paid gig, I want to back it up on the fly, and this camera allows you to do it. Or you've got allocation recording, which allows you to essentially put photos on one card and video on the other. It does all of this automatically. For those planning on recording or taking photos to an external drive, you can turn the USB SSD option to on here. Now in this same menu, you will see a SSD format option. It will format the drive once it's connected, but being that I've got power plugged into the camera, I can't show you that right now, but you'll see a new menu pop up when you turn that feature on. Now I love this folder file settings option, and what you can do is basically create a name for the camera. What I do on all of my cameras is rename it. So I change this to user settings, and I would change this to G9II or G9II or whatever. I would just change this so I know anytime I'm recording a file and I put it in my computer, it's going to have that file formatting to start with. I've got it on my GH6, I've got it on my Sony camera and all of these other cameras, just to make it easy to know exactly what drive or disk came out of which camera. From the monitor display option here, we can also change the monitor frame rate. We can either have it at 30 or 60 frames per second. By default, it's set to 60, so just leave it there. The LVF, which is the EVF, can be set from 60 all the way up to 120 if you need a faster refresh rate. So this is exactly the same as the S5 Mark II, which is always a good thing. These cameras also have Wi-Fi connectivity. Usually what I do, I map the Wi-Fi functionality to one of the side buttons on the wheel, because I find it a lot easier to get to, and this will allow you to use the Lumix Sync app to download some photos to your phone and view them that way. But where you can find it right now is just in this menu, but I'll show you how to quickly map it. So what I would do, I would hold down this button here for 2 seconds. I would find the Wi-Fi option in the menu. It's probably going to take me a moment, but I'll just show you how many options there are. It's probably right around here somewhere, if I had to guess. Oh no, there it is, it's this one. So I would turn that to Wi-Fi. Now, if I hit this button on the side, the Wi-Fi is going to turn on. This is a much more efficient way of doing it. I still have 3 other custom buttons I can map to the back of the camera. Earlier in the video, when I gave you the overview of the hardware of the camera, I mentioned the C1, C2, and C3 options. So if we want to save a custom mode to one of those 3 options, all we have to do is go into the cogwheel from the wrench here and then go up to save to custom mode. And then we can save it to C1, C2, or C3. Notice C3 has 3 options. That's because you can actually add a few extras, but just quickly you can save to 1, 2, and 3 and recall them just by using the top dial. So that's awesome. Another really great feature, especially if you're buying multiples of the same camera, is you can get one set up and then copy all of the files over to the other cameras using this Save Restore Camera Setting option. Now this allows you to save the current camera settings to an SD card, and then you can just re-import them later if you mess with the settings and you want to go back, or you can put that card in another G9 Mark II and go down to the load options and recall them on that camera and then have them all set up evenly. In my other studio where I have 4 of the same cameras, they're all set up using this exact same feature. So it's really handy, especially with multiple cameras. From this last wrench option, we go into the other wrench option. We can select our clock set if you need to adjust the time. You can also set the time zone, which will bring up a world map. And we also get system frequency, which is what I want to show you right here. So I'm in the PAL region, which is the 50 Hertz option. You also get 59.94 Hertz or 60p, which is the US. And you also get True Cinema 4K, which is 24 frames on the nose. It is slightly different to the 24p found in the NTSC region, which is 23.97 or something like that. True 24 Hertz is what you want if you're going to be doing any type of short films, for example. Updating your firmware is nice and simple. You can also check what version you're on from going from both wrench options into firmware version and then clicking firmware update. Now this also shows us what firmware I'm on, which is still the pre-production one. This camera hasn't come out at the time of filming this, so this is version 0.51. Now to download the firmware from the website, it's nice and simple. You need to format a card in your camera, put it in your computer, drop the firmware version on, plug it back into your camera, and then click on firmware update and don't touch anything. Make sure your battery's full when you do it. It doesn't take too long, especially on this camera. I've already done one already. It took maybe 30 seconds or so, and then you're in business. So the firmware update process is pretty simple. Check the website and I'll link it down below. Thanks for watching, folks. My name's Shane. These videos are an absolute monster to put together, so if you can, please leave a thumbs up. There's also a super thanks option down there if this video was helpful. These cameras are packed so full of great tools and features, but I want to cover the things that I think will make the most difference to your usability, just from experience. I've been shooting with Lumix for years, but I really think the G9 Mark II is a step in the right direction for their Micro Four Thirds. It's such a great camera. It's smaller than the GH6. It's less expensive, at least at the time they're both at their retail price, and you get all the tools of the GH6 and G9 and all that kind of stuff in a much lighter camera. Doesn't overheat or do anything funny. I love this thing. I think it's an absolute beast. I'll be buying one of these, and if you haven't bought one already, I'll link it down in the description. You can check it out on B&H. Thanks for watching. Catch you soon. See ya.